I subscribe to a number of news digests online, probably more than I should, and it takes more time each day to go through them than I wish, but several newspapers, including from other countries. The Free Press puts out a digest, Our Future Now, the Huffington Post, Alternet, the publication that I write for. But a new one showed up a few months ago, and I don't know how, somebody got my address, and it's called Amped Status. And it sends me a few top stories from all over the web, not just politics, but also economy. It has them categorized: economy, war, health, activism, which is one you don't find on that many of the others, etc. Good stuff, and I recommend it. ampstatus.com, and I know that it's a free digest at this point for those who sign up. My next guest, David GRAW, who runs Amped Status, really caught my attention when he authored 2 in-depth analyses of current events in which he connects a lot of dots. One is The Critical Unraveling of U.S. Society, in which he lays out, if you see it all in one post, it kind of knocks you out. What's happening in employment and mortgages and health care and bankruptcy and just education, the states, one after another, and you realize, the stuff has hit the fan all over the place, and where do we go from here? And then about a month later, after President Obama announced sending more troops to Afghanistan, he put out another one of these, AFPAC war racket. The Obama illusion comes crashing down, again, putting together just a lot of great information from which he draws his conclusions, and I recommend both of them. David DeGraw started a tech company with friends during the internet boom in the 90s. He says they'd raised millions in venture capital when he decided to leave because he wanted to do something socially more conscious. And he ended up doing some online marketing and business development consulting with Sony, Pearl Jam, Alternet, and so on. But after consulting on Danny Schechter's documentary Weapons of Mass Distraction, he moved to Media Channel, where he has been the director for 5 years, and in the spring of 2009, as I said, he debuted ampstatus.com. Welcome, David DeGraw.
How you doing, Terrence?
I'm good, David. Thank you for joining us. Now, I always start out each interview with this kind of question because I like listeners to get a feel for the people that I'm talking to, that we don't just talk about ideas here. Okay. I laid out a few biographical facts, but can you tell us a little bit more about the path that has you spending your days the way you do now and what you hope to achieve with what you're doing?
Well, it's a long and winding story, as everyone's personal story is, I guess, to how they become to political news. But primarily it started at the end of my high school experience when the Iran-Contra and BCCI affair all started. These were real eye-opening political events that really attracted me to researching politics, and it just kind of developed from there, taking off certainly during the disputed 2000 election. And from there I wanted to leave the corporate world, where I had a good amount of success, to do some political-oriented work. And in doing that, I had met up with Danny Schechter, who founded Media Channel, which is a nonprofit media issues organization. And from there, I've been doing a lot of media analysis for Media Channel. And from that work, I ended up starting ampstatus.com, which you so nicely talked about in your intro. And that's what pretty much led me here in a nutshell. I don't know how graphically you want me to get into that.
No, that's okay. And I realize now, as I think about it, that the tech bubble is, created a lot of young entrepreneurs, or gave them a lot of opportunities, and then that point of the 2000 election was a point. I think that's the point at which I suddenly saw my email change from something that had been primarily personal prior to that to something that was flooding me with information and the possibility for activism.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, the 2000 election, I was at a point in my career where I felt like, I could kind of sail through a nice, salary in the corporate world. But after the 2000 election, it was just, personally, I felt like the election was stolen. I mean, And then, from 2004, that election, and even this last one, which, most people believe Obama won clearly, but from the other end, you get conservatives who feel that election was stolen.
Yep. So before we get into all the issues, tell me a little bit more about Media Channel for people who it's new to. What if someone goes to Media Channel, or what can someone expect from Media Channel? What's its role? What do they do on a daily, weekly basis that's of benefit?
Right. Like I said before, Media Channel was started about 10 years ago by Danny Schechter and Rory O'Connor, two longtime journalists who have the company Global Vision, which makes political documentaries. But Media Channel was founded as really the first media issues network online in '99. And really they were trying to bring together and highlight the work of all the organizations that were working on what you would call the media and democracy movement or the media reform movement. And, primarily what we're doing is we're highlighting all the great work that's being done by many organizations working, for media reform and against concentration of media ownership and bias in media.
Okay. I'm going to throw to you one of the things, just because of what we're just talking about. I'm going to throw to you one of the things that I said to Jim Wallace, my previous guest, and that is that it's long looked to me like unless we have what I call sort of a restored democracy trifecta, that everything else we do will not amount to the kind of change we need. And that's unless we have campaign finance reform, in which I believe the only thing that will work is public financing, media reform.
Drastically moving in the wrong direction.
I know.
Finance reform.
I know. And the second one is media reform, and the third one is election reform. That unless those three are uppermost in anyone who is working for the environment, or working for the poor, or working for, you name it, human rights, that if those three don't happen, everything else gets watered down, and lots of energy ends up just defending what we already have, and it's very difficult to advance. Your thoughts on that?
Well, Terrence, I couldn't agree with you more, especially on those issues. I mean, I'm currently working on a new piece where I talk about exactly that. Whether you're, have Republican leanings or Democratic leanings, there's some common ground issues that we all agree on, and these issues, instead of getting better, are getting worse, such as campaign finance reform, election reform, media concentration. I mean, those issues are exactly what I think we can all come together and work on.
Exactly. That's what led me to talk about them as well, is that it's not those, whatever your issue is, and whatever side of the issue you're on.
Exactly.
If you really want your voice rather than just big money's voice to be heard, now you may agree with big money on certain issues and they'll carry your bacon for you, but when you don't, they're going to carry their own bacon. Let me tell people, by the way, I'm Terrence McNally, and I'm speaking with David DeGraw. He's the director of MediaChannel.org and the founder and editor of AmpedStatus.com. That's AMPED, Amped Status, obviously, AmpedStatus.com. And he's written some, besides collecting and putting out distributing a great deal of information he finds on the web, what they say, the most informative and hard-hitting stuff. He also has written a few long pieces, and as he was just talking about, he's working on another one that where he sticks his neck out as an analyst and pulls an awful lot of dots together. By the way, at the top, David, when I said that you caught my attention and probably perhaps millions of others, do you have some sense of how your essay on unraveling, your essay on AFPAC got around the world?
Well, it was picked up by a lot of different websites. Interesting, it was like people on the far left and also people on the far right had picked up on it. Last I checked, the Critical Unraveling had over 1 million views, and the AFPAC was a little harder to track because so many different sites picked it up. Mm-hmm. But I imagine that that's had about the same amount of views.
Right. Which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I guess it's not exactly what Huffington Post might get, but considering what I'm working with, it's very shocking. I mean, the website at AM Status was just kind of a small niche. A lot of news editors subscribed to it. And then once the critical unraveling piece came out, it really blew up, and my email box hasn't been the same ever since.
Okay, let's talk about the critical unraveling. What did you set out to do there? And for those of you who want to look at it, you go to amstatus.com, and it's there on the front page. But what were you setting out to do, and what led you to do that at that time? Because you hadn't done that sort of thing before, right?
Right. My intention was when I analyze the news for Media Channel, I do a massive amount of research looking at different news, and I grab pieces of the news and I put it into a database, and then that database basically became the AM Status website. So everything that I analyze and look at, I just put up on AM Status. But what had happened was there was just this onslaught of just horrifyingly bad news. And, I would see bits and pieces of it, shoot out in the news cycles, but I never really saw anyone putting all those pieces together. And, to be honest with you and to be blunt, I was pretty pissed off and upset about what I was seeing, and nobody was really doing anything about it. So I, really from being upset, I put together all those facts and news items, and I tried to put a narrative to it, and that became the critical unraveling of U.S. society. That report.
And let me just tell people it's the inequality of wealth in the U.S. soaring to an unprecedented level. The bonuses on Wall Street and the profits on Wall Street, unprecedented. The workers losing their pensions, the home foreclosures, the unemployed, underemployed, and those that are going to take a long time before they're ever reemployed, et cetera, et cetera. And what David did in this was just, I remember when I looked at it, it just piled one on top of another on top of another. And as you say, you got angry that other people weren't doing the same thing, that you didn't, none of this was secret information.
No, not at all.
It's just, it's a story here and a story there, rather than somebody saying, if all of this is happening at once, if all of this is heading in a certain direction, what does that really mean?
Exactly. I mean, the thing, the driving force behind all this is just the massive inequality in wealth. The U.S. leads the industrialized world in inequality of wealth. I mean, we did before the economic crisis, and now it has grown even more severe. But, I feel that the American people, and especially middle-class Americans, they just have no clear understanding of the amount of wealth that has been generated over the past, 25, 30 years. Because it's all been, I feel, robbed from us and given to the economic elite, the top 1%, in unprecedented fashion. I mean, you can look at the numbers, across the board. CEOs in 1970 were making $25 for every $1 the average worker made. Now it's the CEOs are making $500 and more to every $1 the average worker is made. Worker productivity has increased dramatically.
And whenever anyone hears that, because they do mention worker productivity on Marketplace and in the news and so on. What that means, it sounds like, that's great. What it means is there's a good side to it, but the other side is it means they are squeezing more work, more sales, more profits out of each worker while they're firing others, or as in certain sectors the economy ticks up again, they're not rehiring the ones they fired. They're just asking the ones they have to work even harder.
Right. Compared to the 70s, we're working more hours and producing, I don't know what the exact number is, but many times the production level has risen, leading to these record-breaking profits. And, the average worker is making less than they were in the 70s.
Right. Things went up for everyone from World War II until 1973.
Right. Yep.
And the real wages in America have been stagnant or fallen since 1973. And when you go, well, how could that be?
Money.
People have big TVs and people have CD players and everybody has a cell phone. The fact is, the way they've done it is that 2 and more than 2 people work in every family. They max out their credit cards and they borrow against their homes. Agreed?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So let me say, by the way, that there is a book that you probably know about called The Spirit Level. Do you know about this book?
I do not.
Okay. The Spirit Level came out in the UK last year. And it's a wonderful book in that it takes all of this conversation about equality to another level. It's called The Spirit Level, Why Greater Equality Makes Society Stronger. And it makes the point that I'm just going to read this one sentence. The evidence is overwhelming that more equal societies do better at almost everything we desire. That's health, quality of life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that has been lost. They are actually in the U.S., and I have been in touch with them, the authors of this book, and we are likely to do an interview later this week, which will be one of our shows in the coming weeks. I like what they did, which they went and said it's not only bad because it's not equal, but it turns out that societies with more equality are better across the board.
Right. I mean, just look at countries throughout the world. I mean, that statement holds true perfectly. Third world countries have massive inequalities. I mean, the U.S., many people are starting to call the U.S. a third world economic model with the inequalities we have.
With oligarchies that
exactly.
that get what they want when they want it, and what falls below them is not their concern. There's an annual study every year. I forget who does it that does the around the globe the best places to live for quality of life, and even on that survey, which may be slanted in whatever way it is, the U.S. has fallen to 7th. I know that we're behind Luxembourg, for instance, and the number one and 2 reasons for our fall: inequality of income and inaccessibility of health care.
Right. Well, health care was the travesty of health care reform as another driving factor of my anger to start writing these pieces and connecting the dots and all that. Because, if you look at the bailout, okay, Mother Jones just had a great article in which they talk about the $14 trillion being the real price of the bailout. I mean, take just a small fraction of that, and you can give everyone in this country free health care.
Right.
I mean, it's just a travesty. I mean, and the fact that nothing is really done to hold these, Wall Street elite accountable at all. I mean, look at the McClatchy investigations into Goldman Sachs, showing that, the housing bubble was just fraudulent Ponzi scheme. I mean, this is a legitimate news organization. They have all the dirt on this, and nobody does anything.
Yeah. Jim Wallace, my previous guest, actually said that the bonuses that are going to go just to Bank of America, the bonus week, I think, starts next week, and we'll be seeing more about this. But he said just the bonuses at Bank of America would be enough to take care of all the foreclosures in America.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
and why don't they do that? You know what I mean? Forestall their bonuses 1 year and change. It goes back to how, I often say Henry Ford had it right about this. He knew that you had to pay workers enough that they could afford your products, that you had to have a society, that had a middle class to really make the whole elite scheme work. And I'm just...
Right, well, I feel that the economic elite go with the thinking now that they don't need a middle class in the U.S. because of China and India. They feel that can just make up for the U.S. middle class. So that's why I feel that, they've left the middle class, they've thrown them overboard.
I agree in that if you're someone who's risen to the top, you're 40 or 50, you're just saying what's going to happen for the next 10 or 15 years. And you're right that the increased purchasing power of developing countries, Brazil, China, India's middle classes, will let the elite continue their way of life until it doesn't matter to them anymore.
They don't need the U.S. middle class anymore. The U.S. middle class is obsolete, I mean, as the IMF does in other countries. They've done it over and over. They call it structural adjustment policies. There's been a structural adjustment, and the middle class in the U.S. is now obsolete. So they're saying to hell with them. I mean, nothing's being done. And this goes back to what you're saying with campaign finance and election reform. In 2008, it was all about the death of the Republican Party and the rise of the Democrats. Now all we hear is about the upcoming 2010 election cycle and Democrats getting kicked out. Who do you turn to next? This is a two-party system that is at the root of everything that's wrong because both parties are dominated by the same economic interests.
When I heard the kind of inside dirt, as much as we ever really get the inside dirt on what happened in Copenhagen, okay, that basically whatever you could say about Obama's sort of grandstand play of coming in late and hoping to make an agreement with China and some developing countries and then sell it to everybody else and so on, the country that really was the villain in Copenhagen was China. China would not agree. Not only would they not agree to any binding numbers or commitment targets, they wouldn't let the statement allow any other country to do so, and they got their way. For me, this was a wake-up moment that we see all this talk about the rise of China, and China is going to be, the superpower of the 21st century. Here's what I'm going to throw to you, David. If I'm one of those, if I'm a gathering of those elites, whether it's at Davos or out on the Hamptons or in Malibu or, wherever it is, Dallas, Fort Worth, and they're looking at this, can't they see that the time will come soon when China has the muscle that we've had for all these years, that we no longer have the muscle? And wouldn't the lesson be that empire, misguided wars, bad health care, inequality, what's been going on is an indulgence that we can no longer afford?
Well, I feel that they've already kind of made that decision as far as, China. But, I mean, I'm not really sure where you're going with the indulgence we can't afford.
What I'm saying is that if this is the 10 years in which we're jockeying with China for leadership,
okay,
and that if in fact what we're doing while we're in that battle is, wasting enormous amounts of money, enormous amounts of attention, enormous amounts of consciousness, either in wars of empire that we could what I'm sort of saying is you could sort of get away with it when you were the richest, most powerful country. And on the other side, the indulgences of Wall Street and those elites that even, that I'm saying that the wake-up call should come even a bigger way in that, that was a party that we can't be at anymore.
Well, we, the U.S. middle class, can't be at that party anymore, but the economic elite can. I don't really view the world as nation states anymore because I don't think the economic elite do. To them, the whole world is theirs. So, whether it's the U.S. overindulgence or China rising up, it really doesn't matter where it comes from them. That ties into what we were saying before, where the U.S. middle class is just obsolete. I mean, the economic elite, they don't belong to a nation, I mean, there's Chinese billionaires who work with, so-called American billionaires. They don't care what country it is,
Okay, fair enough. And
in my view,
I think you're probably right. What I'm sort of saying is, isn't there somebody that's going to that has that isn't way in the back of the bus that actually is going to wake up in time for this to matter? I've got to let you go, but we will do this again, David. We've been speaking with David DeGraw, the director of MediaChannel.org and the founder-editor of AmpStatus.com. I recommend going to AmpStatus.com and checking out the Unraveling of U.S. Society and the AFPAC ones, and there's a lot there to chew on.